Okay, try this again. So I finished my fast. I fasted for 3 days, and during the 3 days, I felt better than I normally do. Although I didn't feel good. I was tired. I was weak. But overall, it was a step up. So I did feel better than normal. A lot of times I'll feel really horrible, especially like I'll eat sometimes in the morning or in the afternoon, and then I just kind of get wiped out for the rest of the day. So this was better than normal, and I reintroduced food about 3 days ago, and that was not as crazy as I expected or remember it being when I kind of went back after like a 1 day fast, because I've really only done a lot of 1 day fasts. It's kind of as far as I've been able to go. But I think cutting my calories for the last 3 weeks brought some health back to my body. I think I've been overloading my system with too much food, and it's just constantly digesting and trying to keep up with everything, and it's just too much pressure, and so your health goes worse and worse and worse. So I think taking a break helped. Even just lowering my calories, not even fasting, just lowering my calories gave my body a chance to get on top of things and maybe get organized. Because reintroducing the food was good. I felt a little bit sick at the beginning because I wasn't used to it, and then I just bought a big 200-gram pack of turkey meat or something, or ham and cucumber, and that was a good start because it's filling but not a lot of calories. And then I did the oatmeal thing, and I can't remember what I did, but I ate a few. I went to Wendy's, and then I never get the big full meals. I always get like a junior meal, and that's actually still a lot of calories. So one thing I find that's helping me is smaller meals, and then if I'm not hungry, then just not eating, and then that's a big thing. Being able to control my diet helps a lot. I was living with my parents, and they make really good food. My mom's a good cook, so I was eating a lot. And then, when I eat, I'm loading up, and then I'm having seconds, and so I eat way too many calories. So being able to control it helps me. Anyways, I would rather feel good than have good food around. So that's priorities. I want to kind of focus on what's important, and comforts should be secondary to that. Okay, so what I want to talk about is there was a fire in Summerland last night, yesterday, and it exploded in size like really quick. I think within a few hours it was like thousands of hectares, and came out of nowhere. So surprised everybody, but there's been widespread alerts that, hey, conditions are really, really bad right now, so expect something. We don't know where, but be on alert, because the conditions are bad enough that if something sparks up, it's going to go fast. So I watched this guy on YouTube called Kyle's Forecast, and he was really good at explaining it, because he kind of goes into the math and the science of it a bit more than other channels. And he showed a smoke map where during that day there was a thin, clear streak of no smoke, and that actually lets the sun through, so that it heats it up more and dries it out more, so that when the fire did spark, it was worse conditions than it normally would have been if there was smoke covering that kind of blocked the sun a bit. So pretty interesting thing there. Now I look at earthquakes as symbolic a bit. They kind of represent, so you get these large plates in the earth, and they move really, really slowly, but eventually pressure builds up in between the plates, and after a certain amount of movement there has to be a release, and there's a shaking, and then a resettling. So you can look at that as kind of representative of politics or cultural changes or any kind of change in the world. That's going to force maybe a group, a political entity like a country or a culture group or something, to kind of reorganize its relationships with its neighbors or with whatever it's involved in. So you look at America and Iran, that kind of represents a change in, the world's changed over the last few decades, and now there has to be kind of a rebalancing. And so that, I don't know exactly what changed, or but in general, something changed, and they're trying to find a different way to relate with their neighbors. World War II was a massive shaking, a lot of discontent in the world, and America and Germany were kind of both potentials to take over the world and become the new dominant power, and I think they both knew it, but there's a lot of things that had changed over the previous decades, and that was a restructuring, a reorganization of the world. So sometimes there's this massive shaking, and then things will find a new balance afterwards, and then they kind of settle down into this new balance. And then over the decades, pressure will build up again, and then there'll be changes again. So I find it interesting that there's a lot of things in math and science that kind of mirror things that happen in like society. And I was watching a channel called Veritasium, and he was looking at he's a very math focused, science focused channel, way over my head sometimes, but he had like this string and elastics, and he's like, okay, I'm going to cut the string. How is this structure going to rebalance after I cut this string? And you're looking at it, and it seems obvious, and then of course he does it. It's something you totally didn't expect, but then he relates that to how traffic works, and kind of explaining how sometimes when you create a really fast thoroughfare, you cause more traffic jams, and if you kind of get rid of that, because everybody goes for it because it's the fastest, and then there's a traffic jam because everybody's trying to take the fast route, and then it ends up being a slower route. But if you get rid of it, it actually spreads out the pressure. And so there's a lot of really neat things that happen in science and math that relate to things that happen in other areas of life. So yeah, earthquakes are a repositioning. So then this big fire breaks out yesterday. And I'm kind of thinking, what does that kind of represent? And I was thinking, well, I think maybe it kind of represents ideas that can spread through society and cause destruction. And if the conditions are right, then these ideas can spread quickly. So I think, there's this idea like misinformation, and then people get skeptical. It's like, okay, well, who's deciding what's misinformation and all these things, right? Like, who's trying to control the flow of ideas? But bad misinformation, whatever things that aren't true, if you want to call it that, are a danger. That could be anything on a wide variety of topics. So when I was I'm a born again Christian. I believe in Jesus. And when I was young, there was this guy named Mike Warnke, and we actually saw him. He was kind of like a rock star. He was a comedian. But he had this crazy, wild story about how he was in the Satanic Church, and he led all these Satanists around the USA, and he got saved, and he was in the army, and all these miracles, and he had just a wild, wild story, and he kind of went on for decades, and people were amazed by his stories, but then all of a sudden everybody's kind of freaked out, like all these thousands and thousands of Satanists all over and their sacrifices, and he had really brutal stories that he would say. Anyways, eventually there was this group of people called the Christian people or something, and they had this magazine called Cornerstone, and they looked into it. Turns out it was all fake. He was a scam artist. Now, to me, that throws up warning flags. It's like, well, why was he able to go for decades and Christians just accepted everything he said as true? How come nobody looked into it until then? So that, to me, is like, well, that's, because Jesus is supposed to be the truth, and he's supposed to save you from deception and all these things. So is the church, really on the mark? Are they really the people on the earth that are the ones that aren't going to be deceived when they can be tricked that easily? And then maybe they're not really following Jesus, all these things, I don't know. But in general, the only thing I can say about that is, people, Christian or not, need to be more skeptical of what they believe, what they hear. So then a lady came out called Rebecca Brown, and she wrote a book called He Came to Set the Captives Free, and she had wild stories in there. She had this client lady who was supposed to be a bride of Satan. She saw sacrifices. I think there's a story in there where she was driving down the road, ran into a werewolf, and had a spiritual battle with a werewolf, and it's all like spiritual battles and just demons and crazy events constantly, and it's just spiritual warfare, and there's satanic doctors and satanic nurses always trying to kill people, and all these crazy stories. And a lot of Christians just gobbled it up. It's like, yep, this is true, accepted it as true without any skepticism. And Christians I knew were involved in that. And then of course it kind of came out that that was all fake. The lady she was kind of talking about was addicted to very hallucinogenic drug, had like severe mental problems. And then it came out, like she said things like Jesus told her not to listen to the Father because the Father didn't understand humans, things that just don't line up with the Bible. And it was just like, okay, well, Christians should have never accepted this to begin with. There should have been skepticism right from the start. So anyways, I grew up in a time, and then that's a little bit disillusioning when you're kind of told, oh, these things are true, this is right, we're in the right group here, and then it's like, okay, well, what happened there? And then just ignore it and move on, pretend it didn't happen. No, there should be an explanation of why did that happen. So it's good to be skeptical, and there are spiritual realities, there are miracles, there are amazing things that do happen. But then there's also a lot of things that try to sneak in the side doors and try to claim to be authentic when they're not. People just make up stories. So, yeah, so Christians can be gullible. I do believe Republicans prey on Christians, especially in America. And I think it's important to realize that there's Christians all over the world, and most of them don't believe what American Republicans believe. That's or American Christianity is kind of known for believing, so you don't have to say that that's the right Christian belief. There's a lot of different viewpoints around the world. But you look at Karl Rove. He was the strategy guy for George W. Bush. I believe a lot of his tactics were pretty dirty and aimed at Christians. So sometimes they look at Christians as a group, especially in America, as kind of a gullible group that will accept ideas without really thinking too hard about them. So I think some people confuse just believing ideas as you hear them, if they sound right, as faith, and that's what I believe a biblical definition of what faith is. You can trust God, you can trust the Bible, and still be skeptical when you hear things that sound like they could be true. There's something called virtue signaling, where you get a bunch of people in a group and they all kind of say the same things, and then as long as somebody says all the right things, they can be accepted into that group. I try not to virtue signal. I try not to just say Christian things to sound like a Christian, because it's very easy to say all the right things. I would rather understand it and try to, be authentic and say, hey, I don't understand this, and, I'm not gonna, maybe this is true, but I don't understand how it's true. I'd rather, if it's not like something you understand, it's not going to really be useful. So it's better to understand things than just accept them as true without thinking about it. So it's good to be skeptical. Here's a verse in the Bible that said God gives people some time to fall in love with the truth, and then if they don't, I can't remember where it is, but if they don't accept the truth, they kind of follow their own deceptions and don't want to hear the truth, then he gives them over to their deception. And it's like, okay, what can you do if somebody refuses the truth? And then, give them a chance, and then that's up to them, and then if they don't, they don't. So here's some so I'm trying to relate this all to fires. So say fires are there to warn us that, hey, ideas can be dangerous, and they can destroy societies, they can destroy countries, they can destroy people's lives, all their possessions. So be aware of the conditions. So if the conditions are right, then these ideas can travel through society and do a lot of damage. So let's look at a few examples. When Jesus went to Israel, they were on the verge of making a bad decision that was going to destroy the country. They were going to rebel against the Roman Empire, which doesn't sound horrible. I mean, Romans weren't great. Sounds like a good idea, but he was there to tell them, hey, you know what? Look at your own sin. Look at your own problems. That's the real enemy. That's where you need to be fighting, and I can save you. They always thought he would save them from the Romans, but he was there to save them from themselves. And they rejected him. They crucified him because they didn't like the sound of his ideas. They're like, nope, this isn't what we believe. This isn't what we want to hear. And then they marched on their way to destruction. And that's something that happens in societies probably all the time. Is people reject what's true and they march to do horrible things, and and suffer the consequences, because there's always consequences for actions. Yeah, so Jesus was there to save them. Another example would be the Garden of Eden. A bad idea that destroyed their lives, right? Who authored that bad idea? Well, Satan whispered it in Eve's ear, and then Eve whispered it in Adam's ear, and yeah, they ate the fruit that God had said don't eat, and it destroyed their lives. They got kicked out of Eden, and I do believe people get kicked out of Eden today. They make bad decisions. Some people, do drugs, and it consumes their lives, and they lose everything. Gambling, they can lose everything. Just a million things, bad things out there. Lots of things that God says don't do, and it'll destroy your life. People cheat. That's it. That ruins your relationship. That's kind of, hard to come back from, and a lot of things. So, bad ideas can spread like wildfire, and that's the danger. Yeah, so I'm talking more about like ideas that spread. So you look online, and ideas can spread very quickly online now. And if the conditions are right, this fire in Summerland kind of tells me that, hey, an idea could come up out of nowhere tomorrow, spread like wildfire, and just consume a whole bunch of people who are like fertile ground for this bad idea. I mean, societies can be destroyed by something that's not true. If a society isn't skeptical, if they don't understand, how do you decide what's right and what's wrong, especially when it sounds Christian, sounds, all the right words are being said. How do you decide that, hey, this is not true, this is not from God? So yeah, I think Christians need to be skeptical, but I think everybody needs to be skeptical and be careful. Yeah, so I do believe there's a bad shift. If you look in America, so I've heard the opinion that firefighters need to do more. They're not doing a good job. And I think the people telling me that don't really know if they are or not. It's just an assumption. What do you know about fighting fires? There's decades and decades of learning, of science, of math, of saying, hey, what works best? What's a waste of resources? How do we organize resources in an optimal manner? There's just insane amounts of stuff going on that most people aren't even aware of. And then a lot of people will come into that situation and be like, oh, why did they do that? Well, that doesn't make sense. They're doing a bad job. But they don't have a clue. They know nothing about the whole reality of what they're dealing with and how optimized the system is. So it's very easy to criticize something you don't understand. People criticize government. People criticize, businesses, all these things. And it's very easy, but most people don't really know what they're criticizing. And the dangerous thing comes in when they start to act on those beliefs and destroy things that they don't understand. They destroy something that maybe has taken 100 years to build up into a really optimal, beneficial system or something, and they're just look at it and go, oh, that's not good, or that's not right. And they can destroy something amazing that they had no idea about. So it gets very dangerous when people just kind of come in on a whim and make assumptions about things they don't understand and then start making changes. So this is where ideas can really start destroying. So some of the changes I believe that they're making in America are going to have repercussions down the road. They're destroying things they don't understand, things that are actually beneficial that they, for some reason, believe aren't, and maybe things will, and then there'll be consequences down the line. So I believe it's important to focus on the truth. I like science. I like the principles of science. I know a lot of science is bogus, and a lot of people can read into it whatever they want, kind of make it say what they want it to say. But the principles of science are basically be skeptical, don't just assume something's true, test it out, and if something's true, then it should be provable. You should be able to prove that, not just say, believe what you want to believe. So there are a lot of principles in science that I believe are very useful, and I don't think it goes against God or the Bible or anything like that. I think it's kind of part of the world he created is for us to be able to observe and test. If you look at the Mount Horeb, that was a science experiment. They got the prophets of Baal to bring fire down and consume their sacrifice, and they tried and couldn't do it. And then the Christian went in there, or not Christian, but the Jewish prophet or something, he went in there with his, prayed to his God, and it consumed it with fire. So If you look at that, it's like a science experiment. It's like, well, let's test this out. Let's see what happens when we both try to accomplish something. So yeah, I think it's good. Yeah, so be skeptical. And I think a lot of times when there's stuff going on and there's debates, it's good just to be like, you know what, I don't know. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if that's true. I think most people have a lot of opinions, but reality is you probably don't know enough about the situation to be having strong opinions. And I don't know much about anything. So I talk a lot, and but I don't know nothing. So I try, people always, I actually knew a guy, talking to him, and I said something about Iran. He's like, you know what? He's like, everybody tries to tell me what's going on and what they think is happening. They don't know. Nobody knows. He's like, I'm sick of hearing people telling me things that they don't even really know themselves. It's just opinions. And when you go on YouTube, that's all you hear. Opinions. They're not, they're professionals and they're lifelong talkers, but really it's just opinions. They don't know. And there's actually been studies that show that most professionals, when you actually try to get them to predict, set concrete predictions, don't actually know a lot more than the average person. They just maybe this, maybe that. Maybe they know a lot of things, but it's hard to piece those all together into a very comprehensive kind of overview of how something works specifically. So anyways, be careful, be skeptical. Don't worry about rejecting something because you don't have enough information to have a final yes or no answer on it. Just a lot of things out there that we're not going to understand. And firefighters know what they're doing. I don't think anybody's slacking off, and I think we might be at the top of where we could be, and then maybe it's just downhill from here. Especially if people start destroying things they don't understand and thinking, oh, I can make that better, and that's a dangerous thing. So I always like to think like, you don't want somebody to try to be a doctor and start operating on you and be like, oh, I was trying to help. It's like, if you don't know what you're doing, don't be in there cutting things up. You don't know what you're doing. Just you're not a surgeon, so stop trying to be a surgeon and pretending to be a surgeon. Just be aware of your own limitations. Know what you don't know. Yeah. All right. That's it. Bye.